Chapter 1291, Selling Goods. Wolfish Immortal Domain. As Tang Xiu and Gu Yan arrived, they directly appeared on the outskirts of a large city. Sword lights were seen flashing all over the sky while countless immortals and cultivators came in and out of the city gate. The pair looked at each other and quickly landed on the ground outside the city gate. On the way here, however, he asked Yu Zhong to leave since Tang Xiu wasn't yet able to trust him. After all, he was someone from the immortal world. The pair slowly strolled along the wide street full of pedestrians. A reminiscing look filled their eyes as they looked around at the scene of the classical city before their eyes. Compared to Earth, however, they felt more at home here. After all, it was a place they had lived for a very long time. It's the Celestial Vine Pavilion. Tang Xiu pointed to a 100-meter-tall tower-like building and said with a smile, "Of all the merchant companies in the entire immortal world, this Celestial Vine Pavilion surely can be counted in the rank of the biggest few. We can lower the price of the auric perfusion source to them, but I'm sure that we can still fetch 200,000 immortal crystal for each. We're indeed in urgent need of a lot of immortal stones and crystals now." Gu Yan nodded. "Anyhow, how many do you plan to sell, master?" Tang Xiu ruminated for a moment and then answered, "We'll sell 4 and then bring the rest for our own people. After all, it's a treasure most needed by the people of our empire." Gu Yan thought for a while and said, "How many immortal stores or immortal crystals do you need for using the spatial teleportation array, exactly?" "To be honest, I don't really know the specific fare since no one dared to charge me given my identity in the past." Tang Xiu shook his head and said, "But still, we got too many people, so we'll need quite a lot of immortal stones or crystals. Then selling 4 makes sense." Gu Yan said, "I hope this Celestial Vine Pavilion is as credible as it used to be, else we'll tear this branch." "Well, I'm looking forward to what they're gonna do, regardless." Tang Xiu chuckled. After all, the one who's holding the fort in such a remote place in the immortal world is at least a golden immortal. There's even a high chance that the person will only be a profound immortal at most. A short while after, Tang Xiu and Gu Yan appeared in the Celestial Vine Pavilion's office. A beautiful saleslady in white robes welcomed them, then Tang Xiu directly said, "Call your supervisor here. Tell him that I have a big deal for him." The saleslady froze and carefully observed Tang Xiu and Gu Yan. Sensing that this pair was rather extraordinary, she respectfully said, "Please follow me. I'll take you to the VIP room on the 6th floor. I'll notify the pavilion manager immediately. Lead the way, then." Tang Xiu and Gu Yan followed her to the 6th floor and entered a large VIP room. After taking a seat on the cushion, fragrant tea was served and a middle-aged man that gave off a scholarly aura entered the VIP room with a smiling face. As his gaze glanced from Tang Xiu and Gu Yan, he immediately said with a smile, "Welcome, 2 fellow immortals. I heard both of you have a big deal to offer to our office, yes?" I forgot to introduce myself. This one is manager of Wolfish Immortal Domain's Celestial Vine Pavilion, Clip Marchland." Tang Xiu watched the beautiful saleslady leave and quietly closed the door first. Afterward, he immediately raised his hand, took a jade bottle out of his interspatial ring, and lightly smiled. "This is a fully developed auric perfusion source, please state a reasonable price for it. If the price is acceptable, then we can strike a deal without bargaining back and forth. I'll directly leave to sell it elsewhere if I can't accept the price." "The auric perfusion source?" Clip Marchland was stunned for a moment, then he turned surprised. He opened the jade bottle, observed the contents, and then finally nodded. "This is indeed a developed auric perfusion source. A very valuable treasure I'm sure will create intense fights among immortals once appears on the market. Since fellow immortal comes visiting and won't bargain, then allow me to give you a real price for it. How about 240,000 immortal crystals? If fellow immortal is willing to sell it, this one will immediately pay you with immortal crystals. Fellow immortal is free to sell it elsewhere if my offer is not acceptable." 240,000 immortal crystals? The price was still in the acceptable range to Tang Xiu, so he nodded. It's a fair price, so I accept. May I know whether your Celestial Vine Pavilion's branch here has more appetite? Clip Marchland was surprised. Does fellow Immortal have more auric perfusion sources, by chance?
Yeah,
Tang Xiu said. Clip Marchland reobserved Tang Xiu and Guyen carefully once again. Then, he seriously said, if fellow Immortal has more than 10 auric perfusion sources, striking a deal now is not possible for this branch office, and I'd like to ask 10 days of time more. We can buy however many auric perfusion sources you may have 10 days later. Tang Xiu's eyes glinted and he said in a deep voice, we only have 4, and it already took us quite an effort and hardship. However, I'd like to add a little more to the price. 4 auric perfusion sources for a total of 1 million immortal crystals. We'll have a deal if you can accept it. Clip Marchland gave it a thought and then nodded. Deal. Tang Xiu gave the remaining 3 auric perfusion sources to him. After waiting for half an hour, the latter gave him an interspatial ring and said, this ring has 1 million immortal crystals. If fellow Immortal has auric perfusion sources or some other good objects later, please think of us first. The Celestial Vine Pavilion always does our business with absolutely fair prices. Please rest assured about that. I have had countless transactions with your Celestial Vine Pavilion and the deals have always been great. Tang Xiu smiled and said, anyhow, since we've concluded the business, then we're taking our leave. I'll naturally come to find you if other business opportunities appear in the future. All right. Please allow me to send you off. Clip Marchland sent Tang Xiu and Guyen out of the office. His eyes gleamed as he watched them disappear into the distance amid the constant stream of people. At this moment, a middle-aged woman silently appeared beside him, and Clip Marchland asked, did you see their strength? That young man gives off an aura that he has just crossed a tribulation and just become an immortal for some time. I really can't grasp the cultivation of the woman next to him, but I sense that her cultivation should be much higher than mine. People who can sell 4 auric perfusion sources at once are likely not ordinary figures. Clip Marchland nodded and said, but buying 4 of these items and earning hundreds of thousands of immortal crystals is already a great thing for us. Then, shall we send some people to investigate their identity? The middle-aged woman asked. It's all right. Clip Marchland shook his head. We don't need to investigate such a big client. Doing it will only create troubles and make them misunderstand our Celestial Vine Pavilion. By the way, buy one of the auric perfusion source for 250,000 immortal crystals for yourself. Your daughter probably needs it now. The middle-aged woman looked grateful and gently nodded. Then I'll bring these immortal crystals to the vault later. In the city, Tang Xiu and Guyen strolled around and bought a lot of cultivation resources since they now had a lot of funds. After all, 1 million immortal crystals were equal to 1 billion immortal stones, an amount many ordinary immortals couldn't possibly have even after cultivating for millenniums. The pair quickly spent 200,000 immortal crystals after some purchases and then left happily. However, their extravagant spending inevitably attracted some people's attention. Tens of people stealthily stalked them as they left the city. What shall we do about these people, master? Guyen whispered with a grin on her face while holding Tang Xiu's arm. Let's just shake them off. Tang Xiu lightly smiled and said, such rabbles are always easy to figure out. Besides, they are also some poor bunch and not worth wasting our energy. Smiling faintly in response, Guyen rose to the air with Tang Xiu and shook off the tens of these stalkers and vanished from their sights in just several breaths. This immortal domain also had a very large area with an extremely vast landmass. According to the coordinates received from Dark North Immortal, Tang Xiu easily found the Aurelian Artificer sect located roughly 500,000 kilometers in the depth of a grand mountain, above the clouds. Tang Xiu and Guyen looked down at a mountain below. He then nodded and spoke. I've been to this place before, but it's been too long and my memory about it is a bit blurred. But I still remember that this sect was previously in a mountain range with no spirit mist around it. This sect seems to have spent quite a lot to hire an array grandmaster to arrange such a huge array of spirit gathering, after going through some developments. Gu Yan smiled and said, some people found us, master. Tang Xiu saw several burly figures flying up into the sky as he smiled and said aloud, this great Tang Heavenly Emperor comes to the appointment. Please show me the way to see your sect master, Dark North Immortal. The leader, a red-haired stalwart man, observed Tang Xiu and Gu Yan for a short while before he respectfully cupped his fists and said, we have been given the order to wait for great Tang fellow immortal from master. Please follow me. All right. A moment after, the red-haired man took Tang Xiu and Gu Yan to the Aurelian Artificer sect. Refining furnaces could be seen everywhere as they entered the interior, with sect disciples bustling about them in almost every corner. A loud laughter came from afar as Dark North Immortal came in front of Tang Xiu and Gu Yan, along with two other high-ranked members of his sect. Great Tang Immortal friend is really punctual. You even come here before the half-year deadline. Well, we got enough immortal crystals, so we naturally won't waste any more time, Tang Xiu replied with a smile. Anyway, how is it going with the project I've entrusted to you, Dark North Immortal? No worries about that. Dark North Immortal grinned and said, we've invited all the refiner experts in the hundreds of thousands of kilometers area neighboring us, and all of them have been working days and nights for it. We estimate that we'll be able to complete your order in at most 10 months. However, we have invited too many expert artificers and the rate of our spending is very fast. May I? Tang Xiu flipped his hand and took out an interspatial ring with 200,000 immortal crystals that had been prepared in advance. He then handed it to Dark North Immortal and said, check this out. If the number is right, we're going to take our leave since we need to go somewhere else. Chapter 1292, Earth Core. Dark North Immortal himself didn't fully trust Tang Xiu, but he didn't even bother to check the number and put away the interspatial ring directly. He believed that Tang Xiu wouldn't lie to him regarding this matter since the immortal swords, armors, and other weapons Tang Xiu had ordered were still in his sect. Where exactly are you heading to, great Tang immortal friend? Would you like me to accompany you? It's not worth your trouble, I think. Tang Xiu waved and said, I just paid 200,000 immortal crystals to your Aurelian Artificer sect and that made me a poor man again. For that reason, I've been thinking that the Clearwater clan should be nearby, yes? We're going there. Hopefully, they are not as poor as us. Dark North Immortal's eyes gleamed and he replied in a deep voice, my sect naturally won't interfere too much if you're going somewhere else, great Tang immortal friend. But I'm kind of hoping that you can give the opportunity for my sect to get revenge if you're going to the Clearwater clan. You can rest assured, you can have all their wealth. Tang Xiu creased his brows and said, but your Aurelian Artificer sect needs to focus your attention on refining now, no? In case. My sect has a total of 4 golden immortal ancestors. All of them going with you won't waste too much time. Half a month should be enough, I think, replied Dark North Immortal. Tang Xiu ruminated for a while and then nodded. Stopping you from having your revenge is rather inappropriate. All right, let's go together, then. But I'm going to give you all the wealth gained from the Clearwater clan in exchange for the weapons of the save value. It's a deal. Dark North Immortal laughed happily. He hated the Clearwater clan. After all, he almost died in their hands. Even if he was now occupied and unable to eliminate the Clearwater clan, sending several golden immortal ancestors there would serve the same purpose. Suddenly, Tang Xiu's expression shifted. He then looked at and spoke to Gu Yan. Yan, you are to go with the Aurelian Artificer sect's ancestors later. I'll be staying here to refine some things. Gu Yan didn't refute Tang Xiu's decision and nodded smilingly. Then wait for good news from me, master. Eventually, Guyan left with the 4 ancestors of Aurelian Artificer sect while Tang Xiu stayed under the warm hospitality of Dark North Immortal, at the Scarlet Cliff abode. This cave abode had long been the assigned residence for all generations of sect masters of the Aurelian Artificer sect. It was also the best place for refining since the cave had earth vein magma and a handful of 9-yang purple flame that was born in the earth vein magma, which made it a great spot for refining. The quality of any artifacts refined in this cave abode would be at least a level higher even though the materials and the artifact refined were the same due to the existence of the 9-yang purple flame. Strictly speaking, the iron rule of the Aurelian Artificer sect itself forbade the Scarlet Cliff abode to open for any outsider. But after a discussion between Dark North Immortal and the 4 ancestors, they finally decided to provide the place to Tang Xiu for his refining due to 3 reasons. The first reason was the masterpiece scripture of the sect given to them by Tang Xiu's elder. The second was because of a life-saving grace since Tang Xiu rescued Dark North Immortal and Dark North Everblithe. And the third one was because they wanted to see Tang Xiu's expertise level on refining. Inside the blazing hot Scarlet Cliff abode, Tang Xiu was guided by Dark North Immortal and then listed some materials for refining. But when Dark North Immortal got the list of the refining materials, there was no other expression on his face except for a bitter smile. These 3 types of materials, the lucid sky sand, red pure gold, and indigo pentendon, are extremely precious and rare treasures. Let alone my Aurelian Artificer sect, I don't think there's anyone in the River Sky Outer Domain who has them. Great Tang Immortal friend, is it possible to replace them with other materials? Dark North Immortal asked with a bitter smile on his ashamed face. Yet, he suddenly remembered a record of his sect's history. Previously, that mysterious powerhouse, who was also this great Tang Heavenly Emperor's ancestor, also needed some refining materials when he came to his section. Eventually, the elders of his sect weren't able to provide them since they had never heard of such materials. A disappointed look flashed in Tang Xiu's eyes. What other materials do you have in your sect, then? Let me see them. But please spare me from trashy materials. Dark North Immortal hesitated before eventually nodding. His sect did have several extremely precious refining materials, but the value of those materials was enough to give anyone a shock. But he had confidence and trust that Tang Xiu wouldn't misappropriate the precious refining materials of his sect for no reason. Come with me. After taking a deep breath, Dark North Immortal walked for hundreds of meters before stopping in front of a cave wall. He then cast a spell and the wall suddenly split and revealed a corridor enough for 2 people walking side by side. The path led to a secret room in the interior. As Tang Xiu entered the secret room, his eyes swept through the tens of spots covered by transparent shields. Immediately after, a look of surprise suddenly painted his face the moment his eyes landed on a soccer-sized area in the inner corner, where he saw an radiating yellow light. An earth core? Tang Xiu subconsciously walked towards it and muttered to himself before he stood in front of the shield. Dark North Immortal looked confused. He shifted to Tang Xiu and asked, "Great Tang Immortal friend, do you know something about this material?" Tang Xiu looked at the bewildered Dark North Immortal and asked incredulously, "You had no idea about this material at all?" Dark North Immortal shook his head and forced a wry smile. "No, I don't know about it. It's not just me, but the 4 ancestors of my sect have no idea about it either. To be honest, this object has very strong compatibility with other attributed objects. Even materials with yin and yang properties can be combined together in the refining process, resulting in excellent compatibility and harmony. That's the reason we concluded that this ore is very precious, so we put it here as a treasure." Tang Xiu felt helpless. Such a supreme treasure was only used for compatibility and harmonizing roles in the Aurelian Artificer sect. That was simply wasting a treasure. This was an earth core, for God's sake. This object could only be obtained from a planet that had a very rich earth element, that had gone through the baptism of time for millions of years before it ultimately formed the essence of its source. Once such earth core was formed, an immortal on that planet would reach divinity and ascend to become a deity. In other words, this object was something like a living organism and a companion for deities. If this object were to be known to other immortals, bloodbath and carnage would inevitably sweep over the immortal world. Even terrifying existences such as Supremes would participate in the crazy struggles. Had Tang Xiu encountered such a gigantic earth core previously, he wouldn't have met his death directly even though he was sneak attacked by those damned Supremes who were supposed to be his friends back then. It was very likely that he could get a chance to make a comeback. With a curious face, Dark North Immortal asked, "Great Tang Immortal friend, you haven't told me, what exactly is this thing?" Tang Xiu took a deep breath and replied with all seriousness, "This object is a wonderful treasure that even those terrifying great figures want to own for themselves. Dark North Immortal, I hope you can sell it to me." About this, Dark North Immortal looked awkward and forced a wry smile. "Great Tang Immortal friend, my sect only has a few precious refining materials and we also need this object for compatibility catalyst. In refining some artifacts, else it would be impossible for us to refine them. What you ask is beyond our power to satisfy. Every object has a price, the only problem is its number," Tang Xiu replied after ruminating for a while. "I won't hide the truth from you. This object is very precious, but it's completely a waste in your hands, so it's much better to sell it to me. I'm even willing to spend a lot to buy this thing. The price is so high." Dark North Immortal forced a smile and replied, "You don't seem to have much immortal stones or crystals, right? Do you want to exchange it with something else, by chance?" Tang Xiu was silent for a moment before he quickly took out an interspatial ring and said, "This ring has 500,000 immortal crystals, nearly all my wealth. If you think that my offer is not enough, I still have 20 million immortal stones, which should be worth 200,000 immortal crystals. Such an amount of wealth should be enough to buy it." Now, Dark North Immortal was slack-jawed in shock. He stared blankly at Tang Xiu and incredulously said, "You can still take out so many immortal stones and crystals? What have you done in the past few months, exactly? Did you happen to loot some treasure vaults of those super big sects or something?" "We got some auric perfusion sources and sold them to the Celestial Vine Pavilion," Tang Xiu replied. "You also know the price of this auric perfusion source, don't you?" Dark North Immortal's expression changed and he hurriedly inquired. "The auric perfusion source? How many of them did you obtain?" "Oh God. That thing is the most precious object all the immortals dream of having. That's not something like us can buy with any amount of money in this immortal domain." A strange glint flashed in Tang Xiu's eyes and he asked, "Do you perhaps need this auric perfusion source?" "Of course, we need it," Dark North Immortal exclaimed. "If I can get the auric perfusion gold, I'm certain I can break through to the golden immortal late stage within the next millennium, and hopefully reach the perfected golden immortal stage later on. Great Tang Immortal friend, how about selling this precious treasure? If you're willing, I will buy the next one you want to sell even if I must spend all my wealth. Which one is more important to you, auric perfusion source or 700,000 immortal crystals, then?" Tang Xiu asked with a strange tone. "That auric perfusion source is, of course, much more important," Dark North Immortal blurted out without hesitation. "You can find a way to get immortal crystals, but missing an auric perfusion source is a chance that is very difficult to come by again." Tang Xiu himself was perfectly aware of the huge temptation of the auric perfusion source to the slightly weaker immortals, but he never expected that the temptation would be so great. He suddenly felt that he sold the auric perfusion source for too low of a price to the Celestial Vine Pavilion. He then shook his head and threw the thought away from his mind before looking back at Dark North Immortal. "I won't take advantage of you. I'll give you 2 auric perfusion sources and you give me this object. Do we have a deal?" "What?" Dark North Immortal was taken aback and dumbfounded. He never thought that Tang Xiu still had some more auric perfusion sources. Most importantly, He already said that the auric perfusion source was much more important than 700,000 immortal crystals in his eyes. Yet Tang Xiu was still willing to take out 2 portions and trade them with him. Chapter 1293, Who Profited from Whom? Dark North Immortal suddenly felt a bit touched and shot a deep look at Tang Xiu. He didn't try to pretend to decline it and solemnly said, "Such a great affection from great Tang fellow Immortal will always be remembered in my heart. Please do notify me should you need me at any time. This Dark North will definitely be ready to do everything through fire and water and even brave death for you." After that, he took a token from his interspatial ring and handed it to Tang Xiu. Then, he spoke again, "This is the command token of my section. If in the future you or your relatives and friends come to my sect with this command token, anyone who holds it can ask all the disciples of my sect to help with your cause once. No matter how grave the dangers and regardless of the terrible price we have to pay, the Aurelian Artificer sect's disciples will never refuse the command." Tang Xiu received the command token and calmly looked at it before solemnly putting it into his interspatial ring. Although he was sure that he would never ask this sect to help him in the future, it was a goodwill Dark North Immortal had shown him, and he was unwilling to refuse it. Shortly after, Tang Xiu collected the earth core and then gave 2 portions of auric perfusion source to the man. Overjoyed, Dark North Immortal said, "Great Tang Immortal friend, all the precious refining materials of my sect are in this secret room. You can choose 3 of them as a gift from us. Whatever they are." It was a gesture of gifting a present to others after receiving a gift. Tang Xiu was perfectly aware that this was Dark North Immortal's way of thanking him. However, he couldn't help but feel embarrassed inwardly since the value of Earth Core was far from being comparable to that of 2 portions of auric perfusion source. "Doesn't matter. I'll regard this as a favor. I'll fulfill their wishes once if this sect has any needs in the future." Tang Xiu took a deep breath and rechecked over a dozen refining materials before he finally selected 3 of them. He then left the secret room with Dark North Immortal and left the Scarlet Cliff abode. "Anyway, would you like to use the refining furnace I usually use, or do you have your own furnace, great Tang Immortal friend?" Dark North Immortal asked. "I'll be using my own," Tang Xiu said. Dark North Immortal nodded and cast some immortal techniques, then refining furnace placed in the Scarlet Cliff abode entered his interspatial ring. Afterward, he spoke, "Great Tang Immortal friend, please feel free to notify a disciple of my sect should you need any refining materials for the artifact you're going to refine here. I need to enter seclusion now. I'll be out to see you again when the immortal swords, armors, and other weapons are finished." "All right." Tang Xiu nodded. He wanted to refine the versicolor coral garb. Although this sect had insufficient refining materials, he decided to buy them in the nearest city. He was confident that he would be able to make 20 versicolor coral garbs during his stay here. After some time, Tang Xiu had listed the auxiliary materials he needed to make some versicolor coral garbs. As soon as he came out of the Scarlet Cliff abode, he saw a burly and strong female warrior, looking down at him with a stern yet bashful smiling face. "I've listed both the quantity and quality of the materials I need here. It's best to prepare them for me within 3 days. Your sect master just entered seclusion and shouldn't be out for some time. Tell your sect elders when they come back to manage the affairs in the sect later." Tang Xiu handed the list to her and left without looking back. The feeling of being looked down at by such a female giant made him quite uncomfortable. One's height, however, was one's natural shortcoming. Unless he used his immortal force to alter his bone structure to increase his height, he would never be able to surpass the height of this 2.5 meters female giant under normal conditions. Immortal Solicit City. After coming to this city alone, Tang Xiu merged into the crowd on the wide street. It was easy for him to blend into the environs of a city full of cultivators and immortals, given his experience. He didn't want to attract trouble since he came here to buy refining materials, so he quickly came to a monkey-like looking youth in an alley. At first sight, the teenage boy looked very smart given his intelligent eyes. What can I do for you, sir? The teenager observed Tang Xiu for some time and was sure that the young man in front of him was definitely a fat sheep, so he asked with a smiling face. Are you a native and familiar with this immortal Solicit city? Asked Tang Xiu indifferently. The juvenile puffed his chest out, patted it with his hand and said confidently, there's no corner in the entire 19,000 kilometers area of Immortal Solicit City this dragon broker is not familiar with. I'm a guaranteed perfect guide as long as you tell me what you need. I need to buy some refining materials, show me the way. Keep in mind I'll treat you better if your service is to my satisfaction, Tang Xiu said lightly. Dragon broker blinked and he immediately replied smilingly, well, we can go to the Seacom Street's emporiums if you'd like to buy ordinary refining materials, sir. You can find myriads of shops with all kinds of refining materials there. Of course, Senior can also unearth some treasures from those heaps of low-grade goods with heaven-defying luck. But if precious materials are what Senior needs, we need to go to the Aromatic River Road. There are 360 stores there, all of which sell various fine materials. And we can buy any refining materials we need as long as we have the money. Then let's head to the Aromatic River Road, Tang Xiu said. Dragon broker squinted his eyes and his smiling face turned brighter. He then nodded and unctuously fawned. You really are quite an outstanding person given your majestic appearance, sir. The other immortals are just not comparable to you. By the way, of those 360 material stores, the Precious Hall and the Immortal Materials Emporium are the best stores there are. However, the Precious Hall only does business with immortal patrons, while ordinary people who go there can only look around. The Immortal Materials Emporium is not a store with patron limitation, although its name does sound so lofty. To the Precious Hall, then, Tang Xiu added. Dragon broker's scrawny figure violently shuddered and he dumbly looked at Tang Xiu before he hurriedly said with a deferential face, yes, yes. I'll take you to the Precious Hall right away, sir. But since you're a respected immortal, one thing that should be kept in mind is that the Precious Hall doesn't entertain any bargain. Each refining material has its own price tag and you'll be left out once you bargain. Tang Xiu slightly nodded in response. With Dragon Broker as his guide, he spent half a day to get to the Precious Hall. The large classical pavilion was 100 meters high and covered an area of several kilometers. The richly ornamented building looked majestic, and just by standing outside, it was enough to tell that this material store was an upscale store that provided quality goods. Welcome to our store, honorable patron. A young man in a servant marshal garb approached and greeted with a smile. His sharp eyes only glanced at Dragon Broker and no longer looked at the youth again. I'd like to buy several types of refining materials. This list has the name and quantity of the materials I need. Tang Xiu calmly said, we can trade immediately if you have any of them. The youth servant quickly read the list for a moment after receiving it. But he immediately looked surprised and said, we do have the lucid sky sand and the red pure gold, but their prices are very expensive, sir. As for the indigo pengtendon, we have one for sale. This treasure is an item that is always a target for everyone's bid once placed in our store. Do you know where I can get this material, by chance? Tang Xiu nodded and asked. This one has no idea about the specifics because our Precious Hall hasn't sold this material. The youth servant shook his head and then added, however, there's a material in our store which is actually similar and even slightly better than indigo pengtendon. Would you like to see? What material is it, exactly? Tang Xiu asked in surprise. It's a serpent dragon tendon, replied the youth servant. Tang Xiu immediately looked happy and nodded. The serpent dragon tendon is indeed much better than the indigo pengtendon while also having the same effect when used in refining. Alright, I'll buy serpent dragon tendon. How much do I need to pay for the given materials and quantity, then? The youth servant inquired. May I ask how are you going to pay, senior? Immortal crystals, answered Tang Xiu. The youth servant quickly cast a technique to send a message. A few minutes after, 3 ordinary immortals came with the 3 materials. The leader, a burly man, said, "These 3 materials are of top quality with a total value of 560,000 immortal crystals." Tang Xiu inspected the 3 materials first and, after confirming that they were genuine goods, he put immortal crystals from his interspatial ring to another empty ring. Afterward, he handed it to the man and said, "Please take these 560,000 immortal crystals." The burly man smiled after checking it. "Thank you for your patronage, sir. Please come again later." After receiving the 3 materials and securing them, Tang Xiu didn't stay any longer. Although he still wanted to buy more refining materials, he only had 240,000 immortal crystals left, which were needed to pay for the spatial teleportation array's fare for the Great Tang Empire's warriors later. After going out, Tang Xiu took out an immortal crystal and threw it to Dragon Broker while asking, "Do you know some interesting places in this city?" Dragon Broker looked excited. He was just a nobody here who had yet to reach the nascent soul stage. Working as a guide usually only earned him a few immortal stones. It was his first time getting an immortal crystal. It must be noted that 1 immortal crystal was equal to 100 immortal stones, but Tang Xiu already gave him 200 immortal stones in one go. This man is definitely a money bag. After giving Tang Xiu such a label, Dragon Broker's monkey-like small face grinned from ear to ear and he fawned. "Yes, there are many interesting places in Immortal Solicit City, sire. May I ask what kind of interesting place you'd like to visit?" Tang Xiu thought for a moment and asked, "Does this city have a convict arena, by chance?" "A convict arena?" The boy couldn't help but shudder. He hesitated for a while and then forced a wry smile. "Yes, but that place is kind of, too, bloody." "So, where would you like to go, sire?" "Figures. This body has been short of followers recently, so I'm going to buy some of them before going back." "Let's go there. I'll give you a handsome reward as long as you take me to some places that make me happy, got it?" The moment the teenager heard the promise, he was shocked again and quickly said, "Then please follow me, sire. This one knows the most fearsome convict arena in Immortal Solicit City, which has countless fierce people. I guarantee that it will be to your satisfaction." "Any immortals confined there?" asked Tang Xiu. "That place sure has it. Senior can even have those Mortal Kombat gladiators at the Golden Immortal stage as long as you have the money," Dragon Broker answered. "Lead the way, then." Tang Xiu's eyes immediately lit up and he happily said, "I still got many things to deal with, so I don't have much time." Chapter 1294, The Convict Arena Prison. Every large city in the immortal world usually had a convict arena similar to a gladiatorial arena on Earth, a place full of brutality and blood. Every deathmatch gladiator was a slave whose fate was in the hands of others, where they only had 2 paths to survive. One was to constantly kill their opponents on the convict arena, and the second was to attract the attention of a potential rich figure who'd buy them. Immortal Solicit City itself could only be regarded as a medium-sized city in the immortal world. It was due to its location that a convict arena was built here. After all, this immortal domain was much more barren than the other bustling domains, so the greater number of exiles and convicts here. "The place is ahead, sire." Following next to Tang Xiu, Dragon Broker Boy fawningly nodded and said after they spent half a day running and came to a dark castle thousands of meters high. Even with his outstanding eyesight, Tang Xiu immediately realized that he couldn't see the end of the castle at all. "The size of this place doesn't seem to be small, no?" Tang Xiu asked. "It's as you said, sire." Dragon Broker replied, "This little one has heard many hearsays, although this one has never been in other cities. Rumors have it that even the convict arenas in large cities are not as big as the Immortal Solicit cities. Therefore, many gamblers from other immortal domains come here to gamble. You seem to know a lot about this convict arena." Tang Xiu smiled and said, "Do you often come here to play some games?" How come this little one has spare money to play such games, sire? This little one has always been dirt poor and is barely able to get by in life. The boy hollowly smiled. It's just, many outsiders come here to gamble and they need this little one to guide them. Thus, this little one has accompanied many gamblers wherever they go. Seeing how some of them suddenly become rich overnight and witnessing a lot more who go bankrupt. So? Tang Xiu looked thoughtful and smilingly asked, so what? So this little one lost the courage to go to places like this, the teenager replied wryly. This little one always advises every rich person who hires me prudently, hoping they do not gamble in this place. Tang Xiu patted his shoulder and gave him a pill casually. He chuckled and said, well, you're not bad, boy. At least you don't go astray. Anyway, let's head off. It's been ages since the last time I went to place some bets at the convict arena, you know. I'm going to play a few games today and try to win some money to buy some gladiators. A warm feeling inundated Dragon Broker's heart as he looked at the elixir in his hand. His expression, however, looked complicated because he had never met such a generous hirer for his service even though he had served thousands of rich people as a guide before. May I know your honorable name, sire? You can address me Sir Great Tang, replied Tang Xiu calmly. Sir Great Tang, this humble one hasn't the right to advise you or anything else, but looking at this elixir Sir gave me, this unworthy one really hopes that you don't bet too much. There have been too many immortals who ended up miserable after losing gambles at this convict arena. I know. I'm just going to have small bets for some fun. Tang Xiu calmly nodded. He then glanced at the tens of stalwart men standing outside the 100-meter-high gate. To his surprise, these men were unexpectedly golden immortals. Welcome, two honorable guests. Would you like to rent a barouche? A dragonkin girl with a horn on her forehead approached with a swaying slender curvy waist and smilingly asked. How much is it? Tang Xiu asked. The dragon girl answered, only 10 immortal stones for an ordinary barouche and 100 immortal stones for the exquisite one. Each barouche can be used for an unlimited time, so even if both sirs would like to stay in it for thousands of years it won't be an issue. Tang Xiu took out 100 immortal stones and casually handed them to her. Please give me the exquisite barouche. After that, he turned to Dragon Broker and asked, you drive it. At your command, sire. Dragon Broker looked a bit happy since he liked to drive such a barouche and drove it countless times. To him, the feeling of driving it was a lot cooler than flying with the sword. After they picked a ship-shaped barouche, Tang Xiu took a seat inside and watched the teenager skillfully drive it to fly inside. Both sides of the straight road in the interior space were full of open stalls that sold weapons, elixirs, talismans, and many others. Everything was available for sale here as long as the item was considered as an ordinary item in the immortal world. Tang Xiu himself had frequented such a place countless times and naturally knew that nearly all the goods here were for cultivators. Generally, the stronger ones who broke through to the immortal ranks would never buy anything at such low-grade stalls. However, he was exactly in need of such objects. After all, nearly all the people in his great Tang Empire had yet to break through to the immortal stage, so the goods being sold here were very useful to them. Dragon Broker, tell me a stall that has complete goods and fair prices, Tang Xiu calmly said. What exactly would you like to purchase, Sir Great Tang? Do you have a detailed number? Dragon Broker asked with a doubtful face. Well, any pills for nascent soul stage cultivators, talismans, weapons, refining materials, and herbs for alchemy. As for the quantity, it should be enough for hundreds of thousands of cultivators for a century, Tang Xiu added. Gasp, Dragon Broker's eyes turned saucer and bigger than a bell, saying with an aghast face, so many of them? You help me deal with it and I'll give you 10 immortal crystals as your reward when I leave, said Tang Xiu with a smile. 10. The teenager's body trembled before an overjoyed look replaced his other expressions. It must be known that 100 immortal crystals were equal to 1,000 immortal stones, all of which were enough for him to use for several years. No worries, Sir Great Tang. I promise to manage it for you properly so you can buy the most resources with the least immortal stones. Dragon Broker guaranteed and patted his chest. Shortly after, both of them didn't hurry to rush to the convict arena but spent 4 days shopping around. They only stopped shopping after Tang Xiu had completely spent 20 million immortal stones and readied the entire cultivation resources, enough for over 200,000 people of the Great Tang Empire to consume for 100 years. To Dragon Broker, there had been no time as stimulating as these 4 days. The feeling of spending money like pouring water had made his blood vessels inflated all the time. He kept looking at Tang Xiu as though he was a kind of deity. Huff. As both of them came out of a stall, Dragon Broker took a deep, heavy breath, wiped off the sweat on his forehead and respectfully said, "Sir Great Tang, shall we head to the convict arena next?" "Take me to the highest grade convict arena, then," Tang Xiu said. "It's ruled that the gamblers must prove their wealth before entering the highest grade convict arena, sir. They must have at least 10,000 immortal crystals." Tang Xiu nodded and ordered, "We won't be subject to such limited entry." "Head there." Understood. The boy himself had witnessed Tang Xiu's expenses these days, so he naturally knew that Tang Xiu had so many immortal stones and crystals. Therefore, after he took them to the deepest part of the convict arena, he said to the guard outside and said, "Two sirs, we already know the rules." Tang Xiu handed over an interspatial ring. After the 2 guards verified it, they immediately invited them inside with respectful faces. The convict arena itself was an independent space that covered hundreds of kilometers with nearly a kilometer high. The place was constructed like a gladiator arena on Earth surrounded by a coliseum-like auditorium that was enough to accommodate hundreds of thousands of people. 200 kilometers to the center was exactly the arena for the deathmatch gladiator participating in the fight. At this moment, thousands of gamblers were already inside the auditorium, staring at the 2 gladiators in the arena. Both combatants there were neither pure humans nor pure immortals. One of the fighters was a leopardkin male with an Earth immortal stage strength, and his naked upper body was covered with fine iron chains as he swung an immortal saber that created overlapping layers of blades around him. The other combatant was a featherkin male with a human appearance with 2 pairs of wings on his back. At the moment, he flapped his wings and immediately sent crimson layers of a blade that clashed with the former's strike. Tang Xiu randomly picked a spot to sit and calmly watch the fight of these 2 Earth immortals. With his keen vision, he could easily discern that the leopard-headed Earth immortal whose body was covered with a steel chain had fallen into a weaker position and would soon be killed by his opponent. Dragon Broker didn't accompany Tang Xiu to sit but slipped away to the vicinity towards a row of iron cages that could be seen in the north direction, with each cage guarded by an immortal. A price tag and the information about the cultivation of these deathmatch gladiators and their fighting records in the arena were displayed out of each cage. Quickly after, the leopard-headed Earth immortal was killed by his opponent. Dragon Broker slipped back and stopped behind Tang Xiu, reporting in a whisper, "Sir Great Tang, I just asked around and there will be 4 high-level fights 3 days later where all the 8 golden immortal deathmatch fighters will fight. The last 4 winners will win, whereas the other 4 will die in the convict arena. At that time, some high-profile gamblers from several immortal domains will come to participate in the gamble." A glint flashed in Tang Xiu's eyes and he nodded in response. "If so, we'll stay here for 2 days and use the winning money to buy some more cultivation resources at those high-end stores." Dragon Broker hurriedly replied, "Are you sure you can win, Sir Great Tang? You know, there's a saying in some places that you had best avoid doing things you don't have the abilities to handle. I wouldn't have come here if I didn't have the confidence. Of course, you may think that I'm arrogant, yet I've already decided to have some good time no matter what." Having said that, he gave an interspatial ring to Dragon Broker and lightly said, "There are 100,000 immortal crystals in it. You help me to place my bets with these. Oh, 100,000 immortal crystals? The teenager trembled and replied with a bit of a scared face, Sir Great Tang, isn't this a bit too much? So many immortal crystals, just in case. Just follow my order and spare me the question about my decision, will you? Tang Xiu lightly said, if you're that incompetent, I can replace you with someone else. Yes. I'll listen to your order. Dragon Broker's expression changed and he immediately realized that he had talked too much. After taking the interspatial with 100,000 immortal crystals inside and placing the bet, he went back and stood next to Tang Xiu, waiting for the start of the next showdown and the big gamble. Chapter 1295, I'm taking you home. Time fleeted by and an hour passed. Two cool and imposing-looking deathmatch gladiators were brought into the arena. The good-looking golden immortal man in white slightly bowed to the spectators and then announced with a smiling face, this is the 8th match at our convict arena today. An expert of the crystal race against a featherkin expert. The guests who'd like to participate in the gamble, it's time for you to place your bet. Having said that, he didn't stay too long and quickly left the convict arena. At the auditorium, Dragon Broker came to Tang Xiu and bent as he whispered, Sir Great Tang, that crystal race's expert is just an ordinary immortal, whereas that featherkin expert has just advanced to the Earth Immortal stage. The convict arena's authority placing them in this match means that this crystal race expert is very powerful, and may be able to contend with an Earth Immortal. But there's also a chance that the convict arena's management is trying to manipulate the information. After all, such a chasm in cultivation level is not so easy to offset. You just went around in order to remember the information of these deathmatch gladiators? Tang Xiu smilingly commented. It's because this is a part of my service for you, so I naturally must know their information. Dragon Broker smilingly replied, however, I will only tell you their information without disturbing your judgment and decision. Tang Xiu slowly nodded. Despite having sharp and keen eyesight, the fight between this crystal race and featherkin experts had yet to start, so he was unable to judge their strength. Tell me the records of their previous matches. Dragon Broker told Tang Xiu the records of the two combatants' performances in their previous matches. He just simply recited the information about them since he had a good memory. After reciting them, he said, Sir Great Tang, I'm afraid you'd need to take note of all the information of the gladiators yourself if you'd like to keep betting, or you'd need to wait for the start of each match before you judge. A rushed decision and judgment would be less thorough otherwise. Tang Xiu gently nodded as his mind unceasingly analyzed the records of these two people's winning matches. After more than 10 minutes, he then said, place the bet for the win of that crystal race's gladiator. 100,000 immortal crystals all on him. Dragon Broker's throat dried as he asked hesitantly. Yup. Bet all the 100,000 immortal crystals. Tang Xiu confirmed. Despite knowing that Tang Xiu was really rich, little did Dragon Broker think that he would take it so lightly. He thought that Tang Xiu's decision to place all the 100,000 immortal crystals on the crystal race's gladiator was absolutely not a wise move. He just only heard the performance records of these two combatants, for God's sake. Yet, he didn't dare to persuade since his previous attempt triggered his dissatisfaction. While harboring a helpless feeling, he had no choice but to go to the cashier window to place the 100,000 immortal crystals bet. This grand gamble was, in fact, established and managed by the convict arena itself. Regardless of the win or loss of the gamblers, the convict arena was the real winner. However, the losers would lose all the money they bet, whereas the winners would double their money according to the amount of their bets. For instance, in Tang Xiu's case, he would earn another 100,000 immortal crystals should he eventually win the bet. Quickly after, Dragon Broker returned to Tang Xiu with the betting token worth 100,000 immortal crystals. After giving it to Tang Xiu, he respectfully said, Sir Great Tang, you can go to the cashier window to exchange the token into immortal crystals should you finally win. Also, we still have an hour left before the match begins. Would you like me to see the information regarding these two gladiators again? Tang Xiu thought about it for a moment before he got up and said, taking a look at them sounds good, better than wasting time here. After saying that, he left the auditorium. However, he didn't go straight to the cages of the two deathmatch fighters, but started from the end of the row and kept reading the information on each cage. It only took him half an hour to see nearly 100 deathmatch fighters and read all of their information. Sir Great Tang, the deathmatch has just begun, don't we need to return to the auditorium? Dragon Broker really couldn't understand Tang Xiu's mind. He hesitated for a while before asking in a whisper. Well, I'll read all the information of these deathmatch fighters, before enjoying the match in the auditorium then. Tang Xiu lightly said, but you can go back to the auditorium to watch the match yourself if you feel bored following me, though. The teenager thought about it and finally said honestly, I'll stay with you, Sir Great Tang. In case you meet any deathmatch fighter you take a liking to, I can run about for you if you want to buy him or her. Okay. Tang Xiu just answered casually and kept walking forward. There were more than 200 deathmatch fighters in the cells. The match between the Crystal Races expert against the Featherkin expert came to an end with the former as the winner when Tang Xiu came to see the 140th cell. We won. Dragon Broker was so excited that his body slightly trembled. Although he wasn't the one who gambled, how easy it was for Tang Xiu to win 100,000 immortal crystals had really opened his eyes. There was a likely chance that he would earn more rewards from Tang Xiu should Tang Xiu win more immortal crystals in the end. Tang Xiu himself seemed to not hear the teenager's exclamation. He was standing in front of a giant iron cage at the moment, looking at a scrawny and bloodied feline woman inside. The feline woman was very beautiful. Except for a few horizontal stripes on her cheek, her tail was moderately long and had obviously been cut off by someone, while her other features were no different from humans. The other deathmatch fighters always showed a ferocious or sinister expression whenever Tang Xiu approached them, except this feline female. Her expression and eyes looked dull and indifferent even if she realized that many people were crowding outside to see her. Why do I feel I have met her before? Tang Xiu deeply frowned and a thoughtful look appeared in his eyes. He felt a kind of familiarity with this feline female the moment he saw her, as if he had seen her before. He kept racking his memory to remember who she was but couldn't recall anyone. Kitty, stand up and turn around a few times. Tang Xiu suddenly said. An anxious expression flashed in the lifeless eyes of the feline female. After turning her head to see Tang Xiu, she looked slightly startled and blinked her faint blue eyes. But she suddenly dashed towards Tang Xiu at the speed of lightning. Her hands grabbed the iron bars of the cage and stared at Tang Xiu as her nose vigorously sniffed to smell something. Half an hour later, her pupils suddenly contracted and she loosened her grip on the cage bars. Walking staggeringly to the back, she then slumped down on the floor. The shocking mood she had made her lose her mind and just sat lifelessly there despite her celestial immortal stage cultivation. Her voice was a bit hoarse as though her throat had been severely damaged. She swallowed back the rest of the words she was about to spill after saying a word. Crystal tears came down and covered her shocked eyes. Under Tang Xiu's gaze, she slowly lay down to the side and big drops of her tears fell down while her blood-stained fingers gently curled up, making a scratching gesture. Totoro? Tang Xiu's body shuddered and an incredulous look was plastered on his face. With a twitching heart, he stared blankly at the feline woman who kept making the same movements. Show me your belly. Tang Xiu said with a deep voice after taking a deep breath. The feline female slowly got up and gently lifted her ragged upper clothes. A shocking scar was revealed to Tang Xiu, and he keenly saw a faintly visible black line from the catwoman's scarred abdomen. At this moment, Tang Xiu tightly gripped his fists. His eyes were as though able to kill as he shifted to Dragon Broker and said in a heavy voice, I want her. Inform the person in charge of this convict arena that I'll buy her regardless of the price. The teenager didn't notice the unusual situation that just happened between Tang Xiu and the Catwoman, since he was still full of joy of Tang Xiu's winning 100,000 immortal crystals. But he quickly observed the feline woman after hearing Tang Xiu's order and then complied before running toward the cashier. Half an hour later, the boy came back with a goatee-bearded old man in a grayish robe. I was told that fellow Immortal would like to buy this deathmatch fighter. Is that true? The old man amicably smiled and stroked his goatee beard while talking. Is her price exactly on this price tag? Asked Tang Xiu. That's right, the old man smilingly replied. You can buy this deathmatch fighter for 420,000 immortal crystals. Tang Xiu handed him the betting token and then took out 220,000 immortal crystals from his interspatial ring. After transferring them into another ring, he handed it to the old man and said, "These are 420,000 immortal crystals. She's mine." The old man slightly smiled and took out a peculiar-shaped key and unlocked the chain wrapped around the iron cage. He then gave a jade token to Tang Xiu and said, "Her life and soul essence are in this token. From now on, her life is in your hands." Tang Xiu waved his hand and watched the old man leave. A blob of true fire then appeared in his palm and instantly burned the jade token. However, he quickly grabbed the wisp of the transparent soul essence of the Catwoman from it and put it back into her body. Sir Great Tang. Dragon Broker was horrified as though he just saw the most inconceivable thing in the world. He knew that every deathmatch fighter was a fearsomely ruthless character. Unless their life source and soul essence were under control, a terrible fate would befall their master should they have any intention to harm or kill their master. Tang Xiu took out 20 immortal crystals, handed them to the boy and said, "You don't need to follow me anymore from now on, so take these immortal crystals. Don't ever show yourself in front of me if I don't take the initiative to find you." Dragon Broker shuddered inwardly and hesitated for a moment. With a bit of regretful face, he received the 20 immortal crystals and left extremely fast. Tang Xiu then took out a full robe from his interspatial ring and then came to the feline woman, covered her body by himself and then said softly, "You've suffered." Large beads of tears flowed from the Catwoman's eyes. She desperately shook her head and gently hugged Tang Xiu and didn't let him go for a long time. After a long while, Tang Xiu softly patted her shoulders and then took out a springtime elixir and stuffed it into her mouth, saying, "Follow me. We'll be staying here for a few days before taking you home."